Is being filmed, and by being present, attendees are deemed to have agreed to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. Please do not disclose any personal information of individuals, as this would infringe the data protection rights of that individual. And please, if everyone could mute their microphones when not speaking. Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for absence, please? Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest in any item on the agenda? No? Okay, thank you. I don't have any announcements, so I'm going on to public open session. Is there anybody online? No? Okay, so we can move through that. Are there any members' questions, please? No? On to the minutes of the last meeting. So it's the minutes of the 30th of July. Going through for accuracy first, please. Anything on what's page 6 of the pack? Page 7? Page 8? Page 9? May I sign them as a correct record, please? Thank you. Are there any matters arising from these minutes? Starting again on page 6, 7, 8, or 9? No? Okay, I'm moving on again then. Thank you. So the first item for consideration is dress code guidance. Peter, do you want to introduce it?
Just ever so briefly, if that's okay. It's a fairly, I think, self-explanatory document. The dress code was discussed at the previous meeting, as we've noticed from the minutes of the meeting. And I was asked to work with the administration and HR manager just to fine-tune a document and then present it to the next personnel committee for consideration. So I'll report to the committee now for further thought.
Thank you. Comments, please. Jo? Sorry, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. So I have no issues. I think it's all it makes complete sense. I have no problems with it. I just have a few queries, if I can, on a few of the points, just to sort of tie it up a little bit. So on 2.3, where it says all employees should be clean, tidy and presentable always, the word presentable is quite subjective. Could we perhaps consider leaving it just be clean and tidy? Looking at other policies in other places, that seems to be the terminology that's utilised the most of various different places. I had a bit of a quick check. On 3.2, we talk about a tie, but it doesn't say if no tie is acceptable. So I'm just wondering about how we would hold people to account in what way, because these things can be subjective. There's nothing in here about jewellery or tattoos or hairstyles or makeup or nail varnish or religious reflections. Surely we should just sort of indicate that all principles should be based on clean and tidy and non-offensive if we're going to incorporate it, so that people have the freedom to express themselves as they want to. And then on 3.4 and 5, I think I've written again on one of them is potentially rephrase, or where it says about 3.4 and it specifies about what is and is not acceptable. Again, I feel that that can be like the words low cut could be subjective. So I wondered if we could potentially rephrase it to please don't wear any clothing which may be considered to be revealing or offensive, or put in the end as applicable to office or work. And do we need something about working from home? Because it's up to people what they wear, but do we want people to dress appropriately if participating in online meetings? And then the only other one is just a little point about where it says logo or emblems may cause offence to visitors. Surely it should be to anyone, because it could be to colleagues as well.
Okay, well, you've said a lot there. I think we need to go through and see what support there is for each of those points, because you've made quite a lot of changes there. And I don't think we can take them in one blanket recommendation. So can we go through them again and we'll see what people... happy with. So the first one I know was 2.3, and you said all employees should be clean and tidy.
It was just to get rid of the word presentable so that there's no subjectivity at all.
Is everybody happy with that change? Yes? Okay, thank you. Go on, the next one.
The next one, again, I was reflecting about how we don't really wear ties anymore. So I didn't know if the fact that it was called out, does that mean there's an expectation?
No,
or
it
if
doesn't.
it's
It just says that's something suitable to wear.
Okay, so then it's gone. So then not to worry. So then it was 3.4 is a potential rephrase instead of the wording that's there. Is please don't wear any clothing which may be considered to be revealing or offensive.
What do people think? That's a bit looser than what we've got here. Councillor Alban?
Well, it could actually cover more than what's there also. So fashions change, as we know, and it talks about bare midriff, which is quite fashionable at the moment. There might be other areas of the body that will fall into that in the future. So
I dread to think what you were talking about.
So I think Councillor Jones's phraseology there could include even more things as well as exclusive release. So I think it's more flexible.
Okay. Councillor Barrett?
Just that if we're going to change 2.3 to the clean and tidy, and we're taking out presentable, if we'd left presentable in there, then we wouldn't need 3.4 at all.
Well, I don't know. It still comes back to what I think Councillor Jones was saying about the interpretation of that, because what's presentable to one is not presentable to another. And what we're trying to say is I think that clothes should be suitable for a professional environment. But again, that would be, it's finding the right words which are not too easily interpreted by a good lawyer. Sorry, Councillor Strawn.
Actually, that's the very point. It's down to interpretation and having it specifically set out. We are tying our hands into the future as to exactly what we do. So there is no flexibility with the wording as it is, or potentially no flexibility, because you're being very specific on what there is. So in that respect, I suppose presentable is actually quite a good catch-all kind of phrase. Clean and tidy is one thing, presentable, or appropriate for the working environment, because what's appropriate in the depot and public realm is not necessarily appropriate in the office, and what's appropriate in the office will not be suitable for public realm.
So where are we going with this, colleagues? Sorry, Councillor Knight, you wanted to speak.
Thank you. So apologies, I wasn't in the last meeting, so I missed a lot of the discussion. I'm not really sure why we need this policy at all, but I know the previous committee meeting decided to downgrade this from a policy to guidance. And I guess my point is, if it's merely guidance, then a lawyer's interpretation is irrelevant, because it's a guide and people are free to choose to ignore the guide. So I don't think we need it. I think it's a waste of time. I don't agree with it, but if it's guidance, people are free to ignore it. And therefore, I don't see the point in discussing whether it's watertight or not.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Councillor Foster?
From my point of view, I think, taking on board Councillor Knight's comments, I think to have, for officers to have some sort of clearer guidelines, from my point of view, I actually would leave the specifics in there, but then have some other catch-all comment that includes that, but also to take into account Councillor Jones's comment. So it deals with this, but using this as examples might be. So you've covered both, but you then highlighted the specifics, I think, that were sort of the background to this in the first place. So I think I would include the examples, but with a catch-all.
So one suggestion was to combine it with 2.3, which would be clean and tidy and presentable always, and then starting off, clothes that are overly tight, blah, 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 are not suitable. Do we put that in one block? Is that another alternative? Or do we want them left as they are? Councillor Foster?
To be fair, you've got examples, so section 3 is examples, so
Yeah.
it does give examples in there. So if you're going to have an example section, it should be in there, I think, rather than this in the general principles. You have it in the examples.
Okay, well,
Yeah. So if you're going to use the examples, so if you want your catch-all in, or whether the catch-all is in the general principles, okay, maybe that's a way around it. Yeah. But you say you have appropriate within there, but then within the, again, it's whether that appropriate is the right word. But I think having the examples in there gives you some sort of some guides, some support
Okay.
for officers in the event that there isn't a requirement to look into it.
so are we going back to 2.3 and saying be clean, tidy and appropriate or presentable? Or are we leaving it as just clean and tidy? Councillor Woodhead?
I think on 2.3, you could put be clean, tidy and appropriate, and then link into 3.3 examples of dress that is appropriate or inappropriate, or so you've got appropriate then inappropriate, and therefore you've given us some examples and clearly not an exhaustive list, and it's a bit more straightforward. But yeah, I mean, that would be my suggestion.
So we're leaving 3.4 more or less as it is. Did you propose some specific wording? Help me.
Yes, in 2.3, we could put all employees should be clean, tidy and as appropriate. So remove presentable always and presentable always, but as appropriate. And then 3.2, you could put examples of clothing considered appropriate rather than suitable. So the wording kind of matches up. And then inappropriate would be 3.3, and that would also include 3.4 as well as an example. So it sort of reduces one of the bullet points potentially, because what you could do for 3.4 is have it as a bullet point rather than a separate 3.4.
For 3.3, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
and we're taking out suitable and unsuitable and using appropriate or inappropriate.
yeah, and I think that then hopefully also links in with what Councillor Foster's point was in terms of giving guidance but not being so prescriptive with tying yourself up in knots. Okay,
that's great. Going back to Councillor Jones.
No, thank you, because I know that sometimes it feels a lot of semantics, but I think it will help long term for everybody. The only other point was about, and this is open to, it was just a thought, there is nothing in here, as I said, about jewellery or tattoos or hairstyles, but whatever wording we do, it should, as long as it says anything religious reflections, just as long as it's non-offensive I think that needs to just be, we've put in here about clothing displaying slogans, logos or emblems that may cause offence. That needs to change to anyone, in my opinion, if that's okay, instead of to visitors, because that, like, why would we treat ourselves and our colleagues differently to a visitor? We should be courteous to everybody.
So we replace visitor with anyone.
Yeah.
Is everybody happy with
Cause
that?
offence, take it out, just say cause offence.
Yeah.
And then something in there about, I'm not sure the exact wording, but unless it's not an issue, but to me, jewellery, tattoos, hairstyles, makeup, however they want to wear that is absolutely fine, as long as it's not offensive to anybody. Do we have any thoughts about any of that, or it's fine to leave it out? I'm just asking a question. I don't know our policy or guidance on it.
I don't have any particular views on it, Councillor Knight.
Okay, so offence is in the eyes of the person who is offended, not the person who is choosing to wear the clothes. Now, I agree, no one should deliberately wear anything with the intention of offending somebody else. But in the hypothetical situation, someone comes in and feels offended because of something that somebody's wearing that we would all consider reasonable. If we put that in this guideline, that then opens up the council to basically being forced to correct a situation which wasn't, in terms of the actions of the person wearing the clothes, intended to be offensive. Because I could come in and say, I find, I think it's very ludicrous, green tops offensive. And then the council would be forced to do something.
No.
Now, there will always be someone who is offended.
That's not what I mean. Sorry, that's not what I mean. My intention is if I came in with a swastika tattoo on my arm, on my lower arm, is that acceptable for me to be walking around the council offices on, or would I be asked to wear long sleeves to cover it up? Because that may, let me just state for the record, definitely not my personal belief, but if that was, is that something that we would be accepting in our work environment? That's my point more than green jumpers.
We'll come back to some possible wording in a minute. Councillor Barrett?
I agree with the sentiments there, but if we take ourselves back to the changes we've just made, which would be to be clean, tidy and appropriate and inappropriate, I think appropriate would cover a number of the things that are being discussed here regards things on tattoos, whatever it might be, because I think that catches all of the things. So I'm not so sure we'd need to add in anything specific about that in here because it's covered by being clean, tidy and appropriate.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Strawn?
Well, you've got to, I think it needs to be something like an appropriately dressed or presented. You just can't, all employees should be clean and tidy and appropriate. Then you've got down to what is appropriate meant to be. So I think it goes a little bit further than that. This is the trouble with creating policies where we're trying to be very prescriptive and cover things. We're creating a minefield here, and I must say I do share Councillor Knight's thoughts that is this really necessary, because I think we could be digging a great big hole for ourselves.
Well, it's interesting because an awful lot of companies do have dress codes like this. And at the moment, you might say it's not needed, but it may well be needed in the future. And if you haven't got anything at all, then you've got a much more difficult staff situation. Councillor Barrett?
I just take everyone back again to my earlier comment that if we're covering off clean, tidy and appropriate, I don't see why we need to be specific about 3.4 and 3.5 at all. I just think for the reasons we've discussed, I think we're catching what we're expecting people to do. Yes, I agree it's subjective, but I think it does cover most things. It's a guidance document, it's not a policy.
What do people think about that?
Yeah, I can't agree with digging holes because who's to say what's appropriate and what's not appropriate? Who's going to decide all this? Is it the clerk or is it somebody has to be there? You don't know. So, and how do you measure tops and skirts and shorts lengths and this sort of thing? I mean, are you going to take a tape measure out and do it? Have you got numbers? It's all airy-fairy.
I think most people have some idea of what's appropriate and what's not. Councillor Jones?
People disagree.
I'd hope so. I understand what people are saying. Is the right way to think of it as the examples are the intention and the spirit of what the guidance is all about? What does that help around the table to think of it that way? So by providing that guidelines in it, it means that if the clerk would be the person to be called upon to be making a judgment, he would have some guidance to know where to work within, and that's the purpose of it.
Well, surely the first thing would be a conversation between a senior manager of some sort and the person involved and say, you know, a bit concerned about this, and you hope that it won't escalate any further.
Yeah.
So I think we're still with 2.3, be clean, tidy and appropriate, and we're still with 3.3 and 3.4 as part of 3.3. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, so be clean, tidy and appropriate makes no sense to me at all. So all employees should be clean, tidy and appropriate. As appropriate, that doesn't make sense to me either.
And appropriately presented.
I think you've got to have that qualification. Just appropriate it could mean anything. So if appropriately presented, that's, I think, fine.
Okay, so were there other points we haven't considered Councillor Jones' last point, but I think we're rolling that into 2.3 now, clean, tidy and appropriately presented, Councillor Jones, to take on the points about jewellery, hair and tattoos. Yes, are we all happy with that? Yeah, okay. Anything else on this policy? Councillor Knight?
I'll make one last attempt. So I won't make a proposal because I don't know if I have enough support in the room, but my preference would be to have a single line in the employee handbook that says something like staff are expected to maintain a professional appearance during the working day. And that's it, and I would scrap this. So if there's any support for that approach, I would like to hear it. I'll be voting against this policy because I don't think it's necessary. And I think it's from something in the 1970s.
Right. Any other views?
I can't agree with councillor Knight. We're going to cause ourselves lots of problems. The simplest version is probably the best, and it gives you somewhere to go. And whoever's going to have to enforce this is going to have the problem, and then it's going to come back to the council, and people are going to say, "Well, this happened and that happened," and it's all going to go.
I don't have a proposal at all on the table at the moment.
Okay.
Councillor Foster.
I'll take on board the comments from my colleagues here, but I think given that it's a dress code guidance rather than a policy, I think that it's not inappropriate to have a dress code guidance, so it does give some support. So my proposal is that we have a dress code guidance as laid out, with the additional changes that have been proposed.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Jones. All those in favour of adopting the dress code guidance with the amendments that we've discussed tonight, please show. That's 5 of us. Against? 1. Abstentions? 2. So that's 3, sorry. So that's now guidance that the council will take forward. Right, the next item on the agenda is health and safety policy and procedures. This is back to you, Mr. Clark. Yeah.
So we've been looking at health and safety documentation. We've been working with Peninsula, who provide our health and safety support, and they have provided a template policy and procedures document, which is what I've used to put together this proposed policy, just for members to review and adopt.
Councillor Barrett, sorry, then Councillor Strawn.
Just 2 comments on page 17, and also a similar comment related to page 21. We have named people in the organisational chart on here. I think we should take people's names off its roles that we're actually talking about in the health and safety policy. And if you then go to page 21, again, the responsible table, the allocation responsibility of particular health and safety to named people on management positions. It should be management positions, not named people.
Okay, are we all happy with that change? Yes, thank you. Is there an issue with that?
I think there was named people. I thought it was just the acronyms for the job roles. Unless I don't remember seeing that. Oh, the organisational chart. Okay, yeah.
Named people at the top of the page, I think it should just be management positions.
I think we're okay with that now. Councillor Alban.
Thank you. I've got a few points, but I'll just go by page, and then I'll do one page and then leave it for other people to come in. But on page 18, sorry, the paragraph at the top doesn't scan particularly well to me. So I don't know what other people might think, but it says the town clerk has recognised that they retain overall responsibility. I think that might read better if it was the town clerk retains overall responsibility. And the second sentence in that paragraph, I'm not sure that that's necessary at all. So I think the meaning of the paragraph is that the town clerk is overall, has got overall responsibility for this, but it talks about various managers and supervisors actually sort of adding to that as well, and they've got line level responsibility. I think that's what it means.
So you're suggesting we take out 5 words there and just say retain. So the town clerk retains overall responsibility, which is much simpler.
Yeah.
And you're suggesting that the second sentence isn't needed?
I don't believe it's needed.
What do people think about that? Councillor Jones?
I had exactly the same reflection. I would take it a little bit further and I would actually just get rid of from the to here, the first two sentences, and just start that paragraph in managing health and safety matters. Emphasis is placed, blah, 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 and then add as per the below at the end if you were in agreement with that, Councillor Albo. Because I actually think it comes down to, it goes hand in hand with the top of page 17, where it says, although the town clerk has overall responsibility, I would change the word responsibility to accountability, which then ties in with the table and the RACI that follows further, if you would be agreeable to that.
Sounds perfectly sensible to me.
So sorry, where are we now? We're starting that paragraph within managing these matters. Is what you're suggesting?
Yes, so my suggestion based on, to follow up with Councillor Albo's point, was to get rid of those first two sentences, because I agree they're nonsensical, and then just to start from in managing, but get rid of these and just change it to health and safety. So in managing health and safety matters, emphasis is placed on managers and supervisors for recognising hazards and potential risks, and then taking steps to minimise their effects on employees and others as per the below, which then leads you. Does that work for you?
Sounds good to me.
Is that all right with you? Yeah.
I may suggest set out below rather than as per below.
Yeah.
I think that is scans better.
Right, so we've got the proposal to start within managing health and safety matters. Emphasis is placed on managers and supervisors, blah, 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 and others as set out below. Are we all happy with that? Yes, thank you.
I
So
do have
David, carry on, sorry.
One more point on page 19, and that's the fire and emergency arrangements at the bottom. And the first bullet point is confusing to me in that it talks about our premises or at our members' premises. I don't know what that might mean. I wonder if that could be next.
Sorry, where are you, Dave?
On the first bullet point under fire and emergency arrangements, at the end of the sentence, it refers to our members' premises. Now, what is that? Does that refer to members of the council, or which doesn't seem should be there, or what is it?
Could I ask our admin manager, what was that meant to refer to, or at our members' premises? Yeah, we're on page 18, the last paragraph, the first bullet point. The question that councillors are asking is, what does or at our members' premises refer to?
Can I answer the question for you, Helen, while you're sorting out your cough? My strong suspicion that although this might be guidance from Peninsula, this feels like a copy and paste, and it doesn't feel appropriate to us. So I think it's an error.
So we're all happy to remove that? Yeah, okay, thank you. Next, Councillor Alban, have you finished? Councillor Barrett.
Just for consistency, we had conversations in the earlier document around guidance, and we talked about things that may be subjective. On that same bullet point, it starts with adequate. If we're going to be consistent across these documents, then we can't have words in that I don't know by who. So if it's adequate, it has to be by a fire and safety expert or something. We have to say what that means.
Okay, Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, on page 14, it says contents, and then it starts setting out things. If we're going to have contents, could we have the index, which implies it does set out the contents, showing where everything is? I think that would make more sense, because I don't think as it's set out, that page is appropriate. I think it's misleading. So if we could have an index and then general comments or something such as that nature, I think it would make sense. Then moving on to page 19, again, I think this is possibly the copy and pasting situation. If you go down to the bottom where it has employee and workers' responsibilities, it has on the first bullet point, ensure that company policies. I didn't realise that we were a company, and the company appears on several occasions in this, so that needs to be amended to council. Also on that same section, penultimate bullet point, report any good catches. Now, I didn't know we were going fishing. What is a good catch, please?
That's a good question. Does anybody know? Yeah, I think we can take that out. So report any incidents, accidents and non-conformance.
So can I, it does have a meaning in this context.
Go on.
I did look it up. It's no, I'm no expert, but it's kind of it's recognising the problem before it happens. Do you catch it? I was going to bring that up as well because unless you know what it means, yeah. So perhaps it could be explained differently.
Or perhaps we could use different words.
Report any potential risks.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Now we understand what the catches means. I think that would cover the point. And just generally, could we please just check to make sure that the wording is appropriate and that, say, company is corrected to council, because there's another example on the following page, and I've probably missed several others.
Right. I think we were agreed with what you've been saying, Councillor Strawn, but we haven't gone back to Councillor Barrett's point about adequate arrangements are in place.
Can I make a suggestion for the word?
Yes, of course.
Adequate could be changed to required.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that bullet point and the last bullet point in fire and emergency arrangements.
Yeah. Is everybody happy with that? Yes. Councillor Jones then.
Thank you. Just wanted to go just a few little bits to add. So on page 17, just to check if everybody's happy to change overall responsibility to overall accountability.
Yeah, I thought we'd agreed that.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. No, it's fine. And then following on from Councillor Strawn's point about company to council, and I'm sorry, but my recollection is horrific. We had a discussion a few meetings ago about referring to officers and members versus employees and having consistency across policies. I really can't recall where we landed, but this has got employees. So if we are, just to be consistent with anything else, I can't remember if we landed on councillors, members, officers. What was the terminology? Does anyone recall?
My recollection is officers and members. I know it sounds a little bit archaic, but it's what's generally adopted in local government.
So then I suppose just to follow the same basis, if that's acceptable, as Councillor Strawn's point on company to council, to just copy and paste across, if that's okay. And then again under monitoring on page 20, where it says the town clerk has overall responsibility, again, just to match with 17 to change to accountability.
Sorry, what was the point there?
Sorry, on page 20, under the section entitled monitoring.
Yeah.
It says on the 1 to 3rd line down in the middle.
Yeah.
It says overall responsibility, just to change to accountability so that it matches with page 17.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody's happy with that, I assume. Yeah. And Councillor Foster.
Just I guess it's a relatively minor point, but throughout the policy, it refers to a declaration of our intent as opposed to, and the word our is used throughout the document. Are we happy to use the word our as a policy rather than the town council? Or it just feels a bit a declaration of our intent. And I don't know whether that's I've just picked up on that. I don't know what people's thoughts are. If you're happy to leave it as it's just to raise the point.
Should we call it the council? Or
I think it should be the council. That's good. Yeah. I think a good point rather than our, because it is the council. Otherwise, who is our?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So that's throughout the document.
Got one other.
Yeah, go on, Councillor Foster.
Page 17, we refer to responsibility chart, but it's called responsibility table later on. So I know that's relatively minor, but so if we're going to be pedantic, might as well be at this point.
Councillor Knight.
So I don't think this has been covered. So under premises on page 19, it talks about a safe working environment for employees, where obviously we perhaps mean officers, but obviously it should also be a safe working environment for members. But generally, this policy doesn't seem to cover the general public. And of course, a lot of what we do is in the public realm and in public places. So I mean, my sense is it needs further revision to make sure it's considering the potential safety impact on visitors and on the general public. So I think net of net, having heard the number of changes that have been made, I think it probably needs to be revised and come back to council or this committee, but it doesn't seem to cover those elements of it.
Do we have a separate policy for the Orchard Centre being a public?
I don't know, Mr. Triffin, that's a question. I need to check.
Well, I think Councillor Knight's raised a good point. So perhaps we should see whether it should be incorporated into this, but it's very different responsibilities for members of the public. So we might need something separate. I mean, there's members of the public coming into this building, but then there's a building that's specifically for public use. Yeah. Oh, don't go there because joint responsibilities.
I was just about to
Councillor
say, not only that, it's not just the Orchard Centre, it's also the cemeteries. People walk through there. They both Drove Road and Stratton Way. People walking their dogs, and I've seen sort of our open graves that have been ready for, you know, funerals, and people, you know, fall in them and all this sort of stuff. So I think there is an issue about the council's responsibility on our own premise or our own land, if you like, to the public who will be going about their daily business. So I think there is a broader point. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's worth looking into in terms of just what measures we can.
Be good to see what other councils do, wouldn't it? Because I mean, we're opening a real can of worms here because we can't be responsible for absolutely everything. Sorry, Councillor Strawn, then Councillor Barrett.
We have got the situation also, we've got recreation grounds, buildings on recreation grounds. So whilst it starts off good from looking at employees' point of view, we have got health and safety responsibilities to the general public. So I think we possibly do need to reflect on that and look and not to treat it just as being a purely internal thing. We've got to look at how we're dealing with third parties.
Okay, so we'll definitely need to take advice for that. So the suggestion's been made that, sorry, Councillor Barrett, you wanted to come in?
Just to build on that, on page 15 at the bottom, the paragraph there, it's sort of, we accept we cannot transfer our responsibility of managing health, safety and welfare within the workplace to others outside our employ, etc., etc., etc. So I think this document is written as a workplace health and safety policy. I think perhaps if we'd have said that at the beginning when it was introduced, then it would have helped us with our conversation.
Yeah. So I mean, my idea would be that we probably need two policies, otherwise it's going to get quite complex. So if this is the workplace policy, which has been advised by Peninsula, so I mean, we've made various changes, but we know that it's good practice in as much as it's advised by Peninsula. And then we probably need something else for the more public facing side of our activities, if I put it like that. Sorry, I've got Councillor Strawn, then Councillor Alban.
Just on that basis, may I also suggest that the front page actually spells out that it's relating to the work environment rather than just a general one, because if you just look at that as it is, it would imply it's the whole policy for everything.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Alban.
This is a query really. So in the responsibility table, but on the second page, on page 22, the second from the bottom item, which is roof work. Now, I assume we don't actually do any roof work. You know, town council employees don't do roof work, but the responsibility is under the administration and HR manager. Now, that might be sensible if we're talking about roof work that's undertaken by an outside contractor, and that might be what it is. So I'm just asking a question.
So I'm responsible for making sure that the regular maintenance of the buildings has been done. So Claire would be booking that for external company to do a roof inspection of our buildings.
So maybe we should say something like building maintenance using external contractors or something to cover your back as much as anything. Sorry, I'm just making my own notes for a moment. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. Just replying to Councillor Strawn's point. So I like the idea on the face of it to call it a sort of a workplace health and safety policy. I think the challenge, though, maybe I'm being pedantic, is that one person's workplace is a place where members of the public come. So, for example, the reception area, it's open to the public. It's also a workplace. So on the market, someone's working on a stall and at the same time the public are there. So I'm not sure how you can completely split those two.
If I may answer Councillor Knight's comments, I think it's the workplace may not be appropriate, but for employees, maybe rather that some wording like that. But I think officers, if they can get the intent across, rather, it's just trying to differentiate it from just being a one size catches all, and specify that it's basically for employees and probably members as well.
I think that would be acceptable if it's employees and members, not
I
workplace.
think we need to say members and officers then, don't we? Or officers and members, given what we were talking about a few minutes ago. All right. Sorry, Councillor Foster.
A note, we have working at height being a in responsibility table with the responsibility of the public rail manager. But if I talk about the work on the roof, using the analogy of the roof, who's responsible for completing the working at height documentation for contractors working on our roofs? Is that the admin and HR manager, or is it the public rail manager? Because it's not clear to me in this document.
Responsibility will lie with me, public rail manager.
So you fill the paperwork out, right?
Make sure that this permits to work issued for external contractors. Yeah.
Thank you. And I have one other. We talked about good catches earlier on. I'm thinking that good catches didn't feel right with me. And I'm trying to think of the appropriate word. And for me, near miss actually is the appropriate word. So, well, but is a near miss is essentially, maybe good catches is also something that where we've identified something, but is a near miss included in here? If it is, well, great. A near miss, in other words, where we've identified something that could have been an accident, but it isn't an accident. And as part of our reporting documentation, we should record near misses that could have been an accident that wasn't.
Well, look, before we talked about saying potential risks instead, but that's not quite the same. It's not quite the same thing,
because we might have a potential risk, but we might have potentially had an accident, but something didn't happen, but there wasn't an injury. So it's a near miss is what needs to be in here.
So if we put in potential risks, comma, near misses, comma, incidents, accidents.
So I think a near miss would be defined as an incident.
Okay. So, Councillor Thomas.
And you need a log you're obliged to have a log.
Sorry. You need
timing it. You're obliged to have a log with the near misses and the
okay. Catches. Councillor Barrett. I don't know. What do people think? Councillor Jones?
Well, there's a very prescribed list in law. It's been a long time since I've done my health and safety in my restaurants, but there was always a list. Ridor said exactly what was reportable and what wasn't, and that would be the guidance that we would follow, no?
All near misses have to be reported, so we can evaluate them and reduce the risk from happening again, so they have to be reported.
So where are we going with this? Councillor Strawn?
And just mention of Ridor comes to mind. Are we subject to Ridor rules and regulations as it's used in public services and things like that? In which case, maybe the Ridor definitions would be appropriate. I know of Ridor from another place, but I'm not an expert on it because I know what's dealt with there on incidents, so to speak. But maybe if reference to Ridor would be appropriate if we are subject to it in any shape or form.
Are we aware of that?
I think it's probably most appropriate to take advice from Peninsula on that, isn't it? Yeah.
We should be. we should.
Okay, well, we've already said that this is going to come back, so can we ask officers to go away and note what we've been discussing and take advice on the best way
Second
forward?
that.
Okay. Right, well, thank you very much for doing all of this. And I think between everybody, we're getting towards a very good policy. Thank you. Right. There are no items for information. Let me see if there's any members of the public, please. Thank you very much. So may we move the resolution to go into exempt session? Are we happy with that? Thank you.